In a blinding flash of golden energy, a system notification flared to life before the wide-eyed Elias, announcing the astonishing detection of all 5 elements within him. In a sudden, alarming surge of power, a young man named Elias stared in shock, wondering why his body felt like it was burning up from within. The answer to his internal fire appeared with a piercing beep, a notification box flickering before his glowing, glitched-out eye to announce that the Infinite Awakening system was now online. A vast, glowing system interface suddenly materialized before the protagonist, Elias, its empty elemental progress bars revealing an untapped power just waiting to be awakened. It was in a swirling void of ethereal light that an unseen voice bestowed upon him a monumental revelation. He held the power of all 5 elements within his body, free to choose any class and any path to begin his journey. As a golden aura enveloped him, a holographic interface appeared, revealing that accumulating elemental power would allow him to either unlock a new random class or level up his current one. Surrounded by an inexplicable storm of golden light, a young man named Elias could only look on in pure shock, his mind reeling as he questioned the impossible phenomenon of element accumulation. In an ethereal void shimmering with golden light, Elias stared up at a towering system panel, his mind reeling with the staggering realization that he could choose not only his class, but his very element. A single, world-altering possibility suddenly illuminated the darkness of the system interface as Elias realized with a jolt that he could unlock more classes in the future. A triumphant declaration echoed through the void as immense power culminated in 4 glowing cards: green, blue, red, and gold, proof that every single tier had finally been conquered. In the digital void, a series of glowing panels materialized, representing powerful new options and causing an awestruck voice to question if even the fabled ultra-rare special classes were now within reach. A glowing system message materialized in the darkness, clarifying the core rule of this new world. Only the initial selection was a true choice, while everything that followed would be left to chance. In the tense silence of a shadowy space, a disembodied voice broke the stillness, proposing an even more tempting deal. The scene opened on a mysterious man wreathed in shadows, his confident smirk illuminated by the 5 distinct and powerful magical symbols he presented in a single, impossible gesture. It began in a place beyond perception, a silent void where blurry motes of pink and green light drifted through an endless night. A sudden, intense surge of power erupted around Elias as a swirling vortex of vibrant, multicolored energy enveloped him, a stunning realization that this was the signing bonus he had been granted. In the heart of a chaotic elemental storm, the masked warrior Elias, wielding focused blue energy, met the ferocious charge of Orion, whose raw, fiery power threatened to consume everything around them. In a blinding surge of multi-elemental power, Elias's eyes flared gold as he unleashed his infinite awakening, manifesting a colossal, dragon-like energy construct that loomed powerfully behind him. As a vortex of raw elemental power swirled from his hands, the stern-faced Elias was confronted by a critical system warning that choosing his class would reset all of his elemental abilities. Amidst a swirling vortex of vibrant magical energies, a confident young man named Elias extended his hands, his glowing yellow eyes fixed on an unseen party as he urged them to choose wisely. As shadowy figures watched from the periphery, Orion grew increasingly impatient waiting outside the building, wondering aloud what could possibly be taking so long. As 2 figures watched with bated breath, their tense wait finally ended when a light-haired young man named Orion stepped out from a dark doorway, prompting one to cry out in relief. Surrounded by a blur of activity, an enthusiastic woman with long purple hair approached Elias from behind, her bright smile full of anticipation as she eagerly asked him what result he had received. Against the cold brick wall, a white-haired man named Elias closed his eyes, his voice laced with resignation as he offered an apology for the disappointment he was about to cause. A vibrant green energy pulsed around Elias, his eyes glowing with the same light as he smugly announced his acquisition of the Nuclear Warrior ability, a power he noted was merely a rock-bottom green tier. In a moment of quiet revelation, a dark-haired woman in a simple white shirt lowered her gaze, a subtle, knowing expression settling on her face as she finally understood. As Elias grappled with his disappointment, a kind woman gently placed a hand on his shoulder, offering a hopeful reminder that even green tears could achieve greatness and that the world rewards those who don't give up. In a moment of quiet concern, a tall, purple-haired woman gently placed her hands on a flustered Elias's shoulders, silencing his protests by acknowledging the pain she knew he was feeling. She then urged him to go and rest, reminding him with a gentle tone that the awakening process was always exhausting. As a heavy hand gripped his shoulder, Elias's alarm grew with the sound of a triumphant roar from behind him, a voice declaring with manic glee how absolutely hilarious the entire situation was. The celebratory atmosphere soured as Orion, a smug grin on his face, raised a glass to taunt a dejected Elias, sarcastically proclaiming that the world rewards effort and questioning how their teacher could have been so inept. Despite the steadying hands on his shoulders, the white-haired Elias turned his head in annoyance, demanding to know the point of such a garbage motivational speech. The air grew tense as the dark-haired Elias fixed her intense, crimson eyes forward, sternly reminding Teach that he should have known better. It began with a stark, disembodied voice cutting through the peaceful day, insisting that such ideals were not how the real world actually worked. Under a clear sky, a smug Elias playfully singled out his next target, flanked by an amused Orion and their companion. Against a backdrop of ivy-covered brick, an unseen voice began to explain the critical meaning of green tier, the words hanging unfinished in the tense air. A tense confrontation shattered the quiet of the outdoors as the smug, blonde-haired Orion verbally assaulted the stoic, white-haired Elias, declaring that he was an absolute nobody. Orion drove his point home with a predatory smirk, insisting that reality was simple. The gods always favored winners, leaving losers to be crushed. In a moment of startling revelation, a fiery power flared around the white-haired young man, his glowing yellow eyes fixed on an unseen speaker as he fiercely questioned the idea of gods. The energy from his outburst fading, he was confronted by a familiar face, Orion, who sneered that green-tier individuals were doomed to be mere errand boys, prompting Elias to calmly ask for the reason behind such a grim fate. Raising his glass over a room of shadowed figures, a smug man named Orion laid out his cynical view of reality, declaring that without power or connections, they were doomed to the back row, forever abandoned by the pretense of fairness. He continued his cynical explanation, asserting that the strong inevitably hoard the best resources, which only serves to make them more powerful. In a hall humming with the vibrant auras of the newly awakened, Elias's faint green glow immediately marked him for scorn, as disembodied voices echoed the cruel judgment that his fate was sealed as nothing more than a glorified janitor. Against a sunlit backdrop, Elias's sinister smile twisted his features as he scoffed at the naive ideals of hard work and changing one's fate, asking if anyone truly believed in such garbage. Casting a cold, condescending glance over his shoulder, a purple-haired student named Orion declared that one's future is as immutable as birth itself, reducing their entire school experience to a mere preview of a predetermined fate. The air grew thick with contempt as Orion, a smug smirk playing on his lips, confronted the stern, purple-haired Elias, venomously dismissing her as a low-tier destined only to teach school and collect a government check like the deadweight he believed her to be. On a city street bathed in the evening light, a confrontation brewed as a sneering Orion publicly accosted the stoic, eye-patch-wearing Elias, contemptuously dismissing his green-tier status and ordering him to go home instead of wasting taxpayer money. In the tense silence of the room, Elias and Orion's hands locked together in a desperate struggle for control of the crimson container. The struggle for the container ended in an instant as Elias channeled a horrifying power through his grip, causing Orion's head to violently distort with a wet, tearing sound. The world dissolved into a torrent of pain for Elias as a dark, viscous affliction crept across his face, contorting his features in silent agony. Reacting in furious disbelief, a sweat-drenched Elias rounded on the other man, demanding to know what he was doing. The confrontation ignited as unseen hands violently seized Elias by his uniform, but the young man simply met the aggression with defiant, glowing yellow eyes and declared that his attacker's voice was annoying. His defiance then erupted into a triumphant, maniacal laugh as he looked down, taunting the little shit he had seemingly overpowered. The tense standoff shattered as Elias, consumed by fury, unleashed a powerful blast of purple energy from his outstretched fist, demanding to know what the hell Orion was thinking. A desperate no tore from Orion's throat as he identified the technique as the Stellar Strike, a basic but dangerously boosted attack of the Stellar Assassin. From the depths of shadow, a sudden, brilliant bolt of orange energy descended, revealing the face of Elias, whose golden eyes now blazed with a newly awakened and resolute power. Responding instantly to the threat, he raised his energy-infused sword, deflecting Orion's powerful strike with a deafening clang as a system interface confirmed the block. In a maelstrom of glowing energy and swirling debris, Elias's world narrowed to a single point of furious disbelief as he gritted his teeth against the sudden chaos. His disbelief shattered into raw shock as a brilliant light flared just out of view, his wide eyes reflecting a power he couldn't begin to comprehend. It began in a flash of blinding energy, a moment where the only clarity was a single, green-lit command to parry an imminent attack. As the dust of their cataclysmic duel settled, Elias, cloaked in a blinding golden light, stood as the undeniable victor over the crumpled figure of Orion. In an instant, his determination materialized into a radiant golden aura, his eyes igniting with a fierce, otherworldly glow. The tranquility of the suburban street shattered in a brilliant flash as Elias unleashed a concussive blast of energy, sending a stunned Orion hurtling backward. The air itself seemed to shatter as Elias, glowing with raw power, unleashed a devastating energy blast that struck Orion down in the smoke-filled street. The moment shattered with a sickening thud as a devastating blow slammed into Elias's chest, sending him reeling in agony as blood exploded from the fresh wound. It began with a silent scream, as a close-up revealed Elias's face contorted in unspeakable pain, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. The unspeakable pain then erupted from his body, coalescing into a brilliant aura and a radiant sword that materialized in his hand, leaving him to stammer in stunned confusion. Deep within the tranquil woods, a sudden disturbance shattered the peace, causing the young, white-haired Elias to cry out in alarm as a strange power flared in his glowing yellow eyes. In the abrupt silence that followed, a voice shattered the stillness, demanding to know what had just happened. A wave of shocked disbelief washed over the crowd of young men, who could only stare and question how such an impossible feat had just been performed. Amidst a radiant explosion of golden energy, the white-haired warrior Elias stood with unshakable confidence, revealing he had chosen his class for the precise power its glowing light sword granted. His yellow eyes flared with a confident smirk as the golden energy swirled around him, and he declared that wielding such power was simply second nature. With his golden sword still glowing from the mist strike, Elias faced a smug Orion, who, crackling with purple energy, boasted that his opponent had merely gotten lucky with that single dodge. The purple energy around him flared violently as he roared that he was a rare red-tier class, utterly unlike the garbage standing before him. From the shadows of the park, a lone swordsman watched the distant figure crackle with purple energy, a stunning realization dawning on him that the incredible feat he'd just witnessed was not luck, but pure skill. Amidst the clash of steel, Orion's stern focus shattered as he watched a fighter execute a flawless parry, recognizing it as an advanced warrior technique. The battle commenced with a thunderous impact, as a shield of golden, hexagonal light flared into existence to negate all damage at the very peak of a furious assault. In a breathtaking display of impossible skill, Elias was bathed in golden light as he executed a perfect parry, a legendary feat that Orion knew even his own master had failed to achieve in 10 years of relentless training. A violent surge of purple energy erupted from the boy's hand, stunning the observer, who realized with dawning shock that this power belonged to someone who had awakened only today and possessed zero experience. In a vortex of swirling golden energy, Elias gripped the radiant hilt, his mind reeling as he questioned how such a feat was even possible. As purple energy swirled around him, Elias brandished a glowing red dagger with a manic grin, demanding to know if his opponent had a death wish. In the face of Orion's furious vow to make him grovel before everyone, Elias stood unfazed, his calm defiance manifesting as a golden aura radiating from the glowing staff in his hand. Bathed in a golden aura before the academy, the white-haired student Elias declared with unwavering confidence that he had deliberately chosen what appeared to be the weakest class for a very specific reason. As radiant golden energy erupted around him, the white-haired Elias manifested in two distinct forms: a powerful warrior and a smirking student, issuing a chilling promise that judging someone by their birth would be a fatal mistake his foes would only understand when it was too late. In the digital void, a glowing green interface materialized, presenting the critical details of a new defensive ability, Block, a timed maneuver capable of nullifying over half of an attack's damage. In the heat of a desperate moment, a new skill awakened, its mechanics materializing in a glowing green interface that described how a perfectly timed parry could negate all damage and even reflect it back upon his foe. In the thick, anticipatory silence of an unseen confrontation, a single thought echoed with disbelief. Were they actually about to come to blows? Against a backdrop of dust and ruin, a determined Elias launched himself into the air, unleashing a brilliant sword of pure energy towards a collapsing structure. In a sudden, blinding flash of violet light, the swordsman Elias was engulfed by a maelstrom of crackling arcane power, the raw energy surging through his very being. In brazen defiance of the strict campus rule forbidding the use of awakened powers, Elias stood composed amidst a crowd of shocked students as a sword of pure golden energy materialized at his feet. Amidst the swirling gossip of the academy, the stark contrast between two boys was made clear. Magnus, backed by his high-ranking official father and the school's dean for an uncle, stood worlds apart from Elias, who was known only for being dirt poor with zero connections. With a smirk of newfound confidence, Elias unleashed a torrent of violet energy from his hands, the raw power crackling around the dagger he now wielded. The air crackled with panic as a distressed Elias explained the grim trap to Scarlet, certain that if their friend fought back, he would be expelled, leaving them to wonder desperately what they could possibly do. A quiet unease settled over the teacher as she stood outside, her expression clouding with concern as she lowered her gaze in troubled thought. That concern spurred her to intervene, and she quickly stepped between them, cautioning the boys against any rash action since they had all just awakened and could one day be teammates on the battlefield. A surge of raw fury coursed through Elias as he brandished a knife, but a firm hand caught his wrist, prompting his incredulous shout about being provoked and then expected to simply walk away. The hand on his wrist belonged to Magnus, a figure radiating malevolent power, who declared with a sadistic grin that it was too late for begging and he would now reveal the unbridgeable chasm between them. In a maelstrom of crackling purple energy, Elias's face contorted with contempt as he snarled about the unbridgeable chasm that separated the chosen from bottom-tier trash. Bathed in a strange green light, a system interface materialized before Elias by, detailing his status as a level 1, SSS-RANK, nuclear warrior, and explaining that his unique green quality meant his base stats remained unchanged with a standard 100% multiplier. Surrounded by a pensive blue glow, the teacher meticulously laid out the system's mechanics, explaining that blue quality items of the same class received a 150% enhancement, while the true potential of red quality remained a tantalizing question. Amidst a tempest of swirling crimson and golden light, a voice thundered its declaration that the power output had just surged to an unbelievable 200%. As the E-rank stellar assassin, Magnus Hong, lunged forward with a dagger cloaked in a malevolent red aura, a system window revealed the terrifying truth. All his attributes were amplified by a staggering 200%. In a world governed by a rigid class system, a stark truth was revealed. From the very instant of awakening, a red-tier individual possesses double the base stats of a green tier. Looming over the defiant swordsman Elias, the colossal Magnus basked in a menacing crimson aura, declaring that the gap between their powers was permanent and could never be closed. In a moment charged with palpable dread, Elias faced an adversary whose glowing golden sword was matched only by the crushing weight of his raw power and influential family connections. Pressing a hand to his temple in weary contemplation, Elias couldn't help but wonder at the foolishness of challenging someone so much stronger, ultimately dismissing people like Magnus as pathetic. As the memory of his younger self surrounded by menacing figures surfaced, Elias imparted a somber lesson that to survive in a cutthroat world, one had to learn how to dodge the jerks. The lesson then took a darker turn, explaining that for those who couldn't dodge, the result was simply being crushed under the heel of a merciless, shadowy foe. Reaching down, Magnus placed a small, worn object into Elias's scratched hands, telling him he needed to learn how to eat sh*t and smile. With his gaze cast downward, the young, bespectacled Elias quietly absorbed a grim lesson on survival, that one must learn to bend, because going toe-to-toe was just asking for trouble. He answered the challenge by unleashing his berserk skill, purple energy enveloping his glowing sword as he promised that his opponent would only receive an even bigger beatdown. A sudden blast of purple energy tore through the air, prompting the teacher to desperately cry out a warning to Elias. In a maelstrom of dark energy, Elias braced his glowing golden sword for a desperate parry, aware that the stamina-draining block was a fool's gambit against Magnus' impossibly hard and fast assault. Wreathed in malevolent purple energy, Magnus lunged at Elias's defenseless back, taunting that his attack was impossible to block and daring him to even try to dodge it. The confrontation began with a brilliant flare of power as Elias, smirking confidently, challenged his unseen opponent to even try and dodge. In a blur of motion, the battle erupted as a smug Magnus questioned the very idea of dodging, unleashing a powerful dash that slammed into his opponent with a cataclysmic fusion of purple energy and roaring flames. Amidst the swirling chaos of a shattered battlefield, a cataclysmic explosion of violet energy tore through the darkness, heralding the arrival of an immense and terrifying power. In a violent surge of purple and orange energy, Elias pushed his dash skill to its maximum, triggering the blink ability, an instantaneous teleportation that allowed him to phase through any obstacle. Stunned by an impossible burst of speed, Elias could only stare in wide-eyed disbelief, wondering when Magnus had even moved. Elias reeled in disbelief at the command to get behind them, his shock turning to horror as Magnus was suddenly engulfed in a fiery aura and collapsed, violently spewing a black substance onto the ground. Before a stunned crowd, the duel reached its brutal conclusion as Magnus loomed over the bleeding form of Elias, hissing that he was trash while the defeated man writhed in agony on the ground. He then declared that such trash belonged in the garbage, a statement punctuated by the sound of Elias choking and coughing at his feet. The air crackled with stunned disbelief as a crowd gathered around the sight of Magnus, inexplicably collapsed and bleeding on the ground, with hushed whispers questioning how he could have possibly fallen on his own. Their shared confusion was met with a sputtered explanation from Elias, who barely contained his laughter while insisting Magnus had just fallen over by himself. As the frustrated teacher admitted, she couldn't catch him either. A tense quiet settled between them as Scarlet's piercing red eyes fixed upon the man's back, her silent observation holding the weight of a dawning, unwelcome truth. At that very moment, the quiet was shattered as Magnus attacked, forcing Elias to respond by triggering the warrior class's signature skill, Dash, his face a mask of fierce determination. In a blinding flash of energy, Elias revealed the advanced version of his ability, Blink, a skill that allowed him to phase directly through obstacles, leaving an unseen observer to question what impossible feat he had just performed. Amidst a blur of green foliage, the sheer impossibility of the moment sank in, leaving only one burning question. What had he done in that split second to utterly wreck Magnus? A collective gasp of shock rippled through the crowd as Magnus stood with cold indifference over his defeated opponent, a man utterly demolished by a single, brutal move. As the battle raged, Class Representative Scarlet Chi watched with clenched fists, struck by the realization that Elias wasn't just using advanced techniques. He was applying them with the effortless precision of second nature. Amidst a swirling vortex of purple energy and golden sparks, a warrior's frustration mounted into embarrassment as he questioned Magnus' bizarre inaction. Before a sea of onlookers in a vast, dark space, Elias stood as the undisputed victor, his eyes blazing with an inner light as he towered over the crumpled form of his rival, Magnus. His victory was short-lived, as a teacher's voice rang out with a stern warning not to break school rules in front of everyone. As a worried question about Elias's condition cut through the air, a system notification flared to life, announcing a gain of 50 Class EXP. Following the enemy's defeat, a system notification detailed his reward, 50 experience points, 50 absorbed stellar element points, and the awakening of his potential in both lightning and flower elements. Bathed in the radiant glow of his own burgeoning power, Elias watched his elemental stats update and confirmed a crucial theory. Using class skills in combat would build experience, while felling elemental foes would grant him their very essence as points. But the 50 points he'd gained felt pathetic, hardening his resolve to grind dungeons without rest, for he knew the nuclear warrior's true, Broken power required an advancement far quicker than his last attempt. As an agonizing scream tore from Elias's lips, he clutched a fresh wound in his chest, his escape cut short by Magnus' furious vow that he would never get away. Amidst the blood-soaked aftermath of a recent struggle, Elias's hand closed around the hilt of a fallen sword, his grip tightening with grim resolve. The scene exploded in a maelstrom of furious purple energy as Elias lunged forward, his hand clamping onto Magnus' shoulder with a raw promise of death. The tense standoff reached its breaking point as a furious Magnus brandished a weapon at the unflinching Elias, roaring that it was enough. The narrative shifts to the prestigious Awakener Academy, introducing the formidable figure of its middle school dean, Rowan Hong. A stern, eye-patch-wearing man named Magnus stepped into the tense scene, his voice dripping with condescension as he asked if his target hadn't been humiliated enough for one day. With an intense gaze, the golden-eyed Elias watched as the burly man, known as Magnus, suddenly clutched his throat, gasping in shocked recognition. As a crowd of anxious students lingered outside the school in the aftermath of their awakening, the stern disciplinary dean appeared, authoritatively ordering them to disperse and go home to rest for the weekend. With a tap on his datapad, he issued one final command, instructing the students to inform their families all about the new classes they had just awakened. A subtle aura began to emanate from Elias, his striking yellow eyes flaring with defiant light as he questioned the very idea of going home. In a moment of intense confrontation, Magnus' gaze narrowed behind his spectacles as he turned his sharp accusation toward his unseen adversary. The tense silence was shattered as an imposing man named Magnus seized the white-haired boy, Elias, by the head, his stern warning about a forbidden act cut short by the boy's confused admission that he had just been reborn and was still disoriented. The impossible truth dawned on Elias, a young man with glowing yellow eyes, who clutched his head as he realized he had been sent 20 years into the past, a time when everyone was still alive and a critical event on Awakening Day loomed. With a sudden cry from his teacher, Elias was overcome by a wave of panicked realization, clutching his head as he remembered the single, most important detail he had somehow overlooked. His panic instantly twisted into fury, and deaf to his teacher's desperate command to stop, he unleashed a vicious kick into Magnus' side. In a tense and silent room, a teacher stared with wide-eyed apprehension as the imposing figure of a man with glasses watched her with unnerving intensity. In a tense hallway confrontation, an enraged Magnus delivered a final warning to the teacher about controlling her students, a threat she accepted with a humiliating bow as the boy responsible for the chaos fled the scene. The quiet of the stately office shattered as a furious Magnus stood before the man at the desk, insisting his recent defeat was nothing more than a stroke of luck for the punk who had beaten him. His frustration then boiled over as he clenched his collar, spitting that there was absolutely no way he could have been defeated. Leaning casually against his desk, Magnus' words struck a nerve, causing the formidable Elias to roar back in furious disbelief at the suggestion that he was merely lucky. The moment Magnus charged forward, he was violently repelled by a surge of purple energy erupting from a now composed Elias, causing a stern observer to demand if anyone had a clue what the boy had just done. In a stunning display of combat prowess, Magnus initiated the advanced skill Blink, but revealed the real kicker in the microsecond before vanishing, an explosive contact attack that engulfed both Elias and Scarlet. In a cataclysmic explosion of golden light, the attacker pinpointed his foe's single weakest spot, striking with surgical precision to completely shatter their defense. A wave of shock washed over the veteran fighter Magnus as he realized the flawless combo he had just witnessed was composed of basic warrior skills, executed with a brutal precision he couldn't replicate even after 15 years of combat. The battle within the ember-lit cavern ended as decisively as it began, a fiery KO flashing into existence to confirm a near-flawless victory. In the bloody aftermath of their duel, Elias loomed over the kneeling form of Magnus, his radiant golden sword casting a triumphant glow upon the decisive end of their conflict. The quiet aftermath was shattered by a disembodied voice that brutally mocked the recent battle, calling it a pathetic spectacle akin to a seasoned pro toying with a novice using only basic moves. As power lines stretched across a foreboding sky, a mysterious voice broke the silence with a warning that the boy was not what he appeared to be. The scene erupts in a frantic dash, the urban landscape warping into a dizzying blur of motion. The city dissolved into a frantic blur as Elias, consumed by a fierce and urgent purpose, sprinted desperately through its streets. With his glowing yellow eyes cutting through the shadows, his entire being focused on the one thing he absolutely had to do now that he was reborn. In the quiet turmoil of his mind, a single, sharp question began to surface, demanding to know what purpose he had left besides revenge. The quiet city street shattered with the force of a single, glowing stomp, as Elias planted his foot with unyielding determination. Panting as he raced through the darkened city, a sudden, heart-pounding realization struck him. This was it. Amidst the crumbling concrete of a desolate city block, a white-haired young man named Elias planted his feet, every muscle trembling with a desperate, panting strain. The air in the blood-splattered alley hung thick with violence as a wounded Elias gasped for breath, his terror-filled eyes fixed on the menacing, crimson-wreathed figure of Magnus towering over the destruction. Bathed in dramatic light, a young man named Elias grit his teeth, resolving with fierce intensity that he had to stop what was coming, even if it cost him his life. A glowing system interface flickered into existence, defining Elias Bai's starting point not by his meager E-rank stats, but by the overwhelming promise of his class, Nuclear Warrior. As if summoned from the void, a holographic display materialized, its glowing green text detailing two new abilities, Dash, a skill promising a tremendous burst of speed, and Blink, an evolution that would grant instant teleportation. In the tense silence, a system window materialized with a menacing red light, detailing the formidable profile of Magnus Hong, an E-rank stellar assassin with unervingly high speed and the deadly skills of Backstab and Berserk.